Hartwood in Tulum is an open-air restaurant that's been drawing packed houses and rave reviews. Chef Eric Werner has created one of the Yucatan's hottest restaurants while sourcing the region's unique ingredients through small local farms, or milpas. Chef Eric began his career in farm-to-table restaurants, but in Brooklyn. Sourcing ingredients here is a much different ballgame.
We realized that it was much different within the first couple months of doing our purveying, and that led me kind of from starting in the Tulum area and the Caribbean Sea that's in front to all the way across the Yucatan Peninsula.
Is that right?
And that journey is still ongoing. There's so many little places and towns and farms and secret markets to explore and discover within the Yucatan that it's incredible, and so it's fascinating all the time.
So tell me about your farms, or your milpas, the ones that you work with the most. What are they like?
It's not what you would think of a normal farm to be like. You're walking into an area that is, part of it is cleared, part of it is uncleared. There's no fertilizers, there's no machinery, there's no nothing. So at any moment, we could be raided by tacons, which are kind of in the monkey family, and just load the meal pot at night with maybe 20 to 30 of them and just eat everything, So it's constantly looking out for those kind of things. It's a tremendous amount of work to keep up with it. It doesn't produce its worth, but you do it because it's right. And you're learning, and it's a real experience being part of it.
But you have to get stuff for your guests here at the restaurant.
Oh yeah, of course.
So
yes.
you still got to make it productive.
Yes, 100%. So I mean, thinking about like some of the major things that are really productive is, I would say, a lot of the beans, the EBs that we get from the fresh beans, the climbing beans. The mangoes that are grown out there.
Okay, so I think that because you're surrounded by sea here, you must have some very interesting ways of getting directly from the fishermen your fish.
Yeah, that was one of the main things that we started off with in the beginning. We started off with a small cooperative fishing family in Tulum. Now, what turned out to be 4 guys fishing is now 15 guys.
Oh, really?
Okay, and so you do 15 times all of their families. Now you have this huge network of fishermen in a community that started off so small and is growing and doing so much more. And then on top of that, we have 2 octopus guys coming from Hobosh, coming from the Gulf. You have guys going out for lobster. So it's you look at the restaurant having a certain amount of employees and family that's working here, but then all these other people that are working here too, and you start to see how much bigger it is. And that whole idea of supporting the community is where we stand. I'm not the owner of our farms. I'm here to work with them and to keep buying their ingredients and to serve in the restaurant. And I think that that's a healthy community.
After seeing what Eric was able to do with some of the amazing ingredients available here in the Yucatan, I just had to cook. But I couldn't wait till I got back to Chicago. Now, up in Playa del Carmen, where I was staying, there's some great resources, and the farmer's market was my first stop. I was able to get some aromatic heirloom tomatoes and a jar of small batch honey.
Muy reducida, muy pocos litros al año.
Another stand had organic eggs. And I picked up some fresh herbs. Now, the kitchen where I'm staying is pretty well equipped, but I thought I could use a nice cutting board, and I knew it would make a great souvenir to take home. Now, I definitely wanted fish to be on my menu, so I headed over to this local fish shop called El Mero Mero. They had a few different kinds of fish that were really fresh. Boquinete, some people call that hogfish. Robalo, we sometimes call that snook. But it was the corvina that really caught my eye. ¿De dónde viene este pescado?
De entre Islas Mujeres y el Golfo de México.
¿Dónde llega? ¿A cuál puerto?
Llegamos al puerto de Punta Sama.
Punta Sama, sí, donde está el ferry.
Exactamente.
The corvina was a little smaller than I needed, so I decided to buy 2. They weighed the fish and then scaled them for me. To finish up my shopping, I stopped by the Dac Market, my favorite place in Playa. There is nothing that makes me happier than coming into a market like this that's just brimming with beautiful, fresh produce. I mean, it's just all the possibilities just start going through my mind. And when you're here in Mexico, you get to see a lot of different produce that we don't necessarily have in the United States. I mean, just like this zucchini over here. Well, I call it zucchini, but this is really the kind that's called tatume when we find it in the States. It's a little bit lighter in color than our zucchini, more compact, a little bit sweeter. I want to work with that. And these tomatillos that are here, they don't have their husks on them anymore. They're already peeled, and I know that I could use those for a really good salsa. I mean, these poblanos are so vibrant and fresh. It's really beautiful. I got an idea of what I want to do with that too. So I'm going to need 4 of those. And then look down here. Now, these are sour oranges. They're as sour as a lemon. You can tell that they're sour oranges because they got that really rough exterior skin, which is very aromatic as well. That'll add some dazzle to a dish. And of course, I'm going to need some garlic here, so I'll take a big head of that. And of course, I'm going to need some kind of spice. So we're here in the Yucatan Peninsula, so why not the habanero chili? Grab a handful of that, and that'll spice things up. One of my favorite things to do when I travel is to rent a place that I can cook in. That gives me, of course, the opportunity to go into the markets and buy some ingredients and then make something that's going to have that special local flavor. And that's exactly what I've done here in Playa del Carmen. And it's this super cool, old school playa place. And it's situated right behind a restaurant. Now, when I know I'm going to cook, then I always make sure to bring just a little tiny bit of equipment. I always like to travel with a great big skillet, a pair of tongs, a spatula, and of course a chef's knife. With those 4 things, I can do a really nice meal, and that's what I'm going to do right now. So I'm going to start by making a dessert, and for me, one of the simplest things that I know I can do pretty much anywhere in the world and give it a local flavor is to make a bread pudding. Now at home I would make it with a sort of rich egg bread, something like a brioche. And here I found these really nice rich, well, they look like croissant, but it's really much more like a buttery egg bread. And I'm going to use that to cut up into smaller pieces so that I can make my bread pudding with it. I'm going to need about 8 cups of these bread cubes. I always find a blender jar to be a handy measuring device when I'm traveling. Okay, so I've got some butter here that's melted, and I've let it brown just a little bit. It's that beautiful Mexican butter that's very cultured, so it has a slightly cheesy kind of aroma. I've melted it, I've got it over the fire. Now, normally I would do this on a baking sheet and then let this bread toast in the oven, but I don't have a baking sheet to work with here. So I'm just going to stir this bread in my large skillet until it's uniformly coated with the browned butter. And then I'm going to let it toast here. Toasting the bread before making a bread pudding, I think, is one of the best ways to get the most flavor out of a bread pudding. Now, while this is browning, I'm going to start the custard for our bread pudding. I'm going to measure a little bit more than a half cup of sugar into a small pot, slightly brown sugar that's very common in Mexico. And then this is the reason that I decided to do bread pudding. At the farmer's market here, I found fresh squeezed coconut milk. So I bought some of that. I've got a little bit less than a couple of cups of that, and I'm going to pour it into the sugar over a kind of medium heat. Let that come to barely a simmer there. Give it one final little toss here. Not quite as evenly toasted as what I would have been able to do in a sheet pan in the oven, but I think it'll be good. Now, on to the eggs part of this. Fresh organic eggs from the farmer's market. Give it a little douse of some dark rum You could use some vanilla, you could use Stabentun, that wonderful honey liqueur that you find around here. It's gonna need a tiny bit of salt, so I'll put that in there. And then a whisk to beat them. And once that's beaten, our warm coconut milk mixture and sugar. And I'm actually gonna stream it in so that I don't shock those eggs and curdle any part of it. Now the next thing is to soak the toasted bread in this custard mixture, our coconut custard mixture, for about 15 minutes for it to absorb. Once that is done, I'm gonna butter a small baking dish, put our bread pudding into it, slide it into the oven, and bake it until it's done. Low kind of temperature, around 300 degrees. It'll take about a half an hour. When I've got a place to cook in Mexico, one of my go-to dishes is the Chile Regino, a simple one, not a battered and fried one, but one that can feature all the delicious local flavors. So I'm starting with the poblano, because that's the sort of standard bearer for a Chile Regino, and I'm gonna roast them over an open fire here. Most of the stoves in Mexico are gas stoves, and once they're sort of blackened like that, on the top, you can flip it over and you just keep roasting it and turning it until the skin is completely blackened all around. Once all of the chilies are uniformly blackened on the outside, let them cool down to room temperature. Then rub off all the blackened skin. Poke a small hole in the side. Reach your finger in and dislodge all of the seeds around the seed pod. Then rinse your chilies out to get rid of all of those seeds and lay them in a baking dish. I'm going to start the filling for the chiles rellenos with some chopped red onion and some chopped garlic. I'm going to film my skillet with some oil. Any kind of oil will work for this, or maybe even butter. I found this avocado oil here that I thought would be really fun to play around with. So first into the skillet is going to be the red onion, and then the two stars of this filling are going to be the Mexican calabacitas, this tatume style squash that you find here. I'm going to chop that up, but also I found this super cool longaniza de Valladolid. It's a smoked sausage, pork sausage, but it's flavored with the local season everything recado rojo made from achiote. So I'm going to chop that up, add that to the skillet too, and let everything saute together. I'm going to chop up the Mexican zucchini, and then for the sausage, I'm going to slit it down the side and then peel off its casing, and then break up the dryish meat. Then these are all going to go into it, and I say all because I'm going to put the garlic in there now. The onion and the calabacitas, the little zucchinis, are already starting to brown, so now our garlic can go in there. Now, if I was cooking this back in the States, I'd probably use some cooked smoked sausage in this in place of the longaniza, or I would use some cooked chorizo sausage, which would be really good as well. Okay, now this would be super delicious just the way that it is, but I have a little surprise. It's plantain. I found a ripe plantain, and I thought the little bit of sweetness in this would be really delicious. So when you find a ripe plantain, and it has to be turning dark on the outside, you cut the ends of it off, then make a little slit down the side of it, peel back that really tough skin, and then cut it into little cubes. I'm going to slide those into the pan as well and let them cook until they're soft. that's looking really good. I'm going to give it a little bit of salt. I brought this beautiful sea salt from Celestune. It's the pink salt. But I don't want to give it too much because I'm going to stick everything together with this cheese. Now, it's not exactly a local cheese, but it's super popular here. And it's used in a lot of the traditional dishes from here. So it's a red cellophane wrapped Edam cheese from Holland. I know that sounds really crazy, but in the Yucatan it's called queso de bola.
Unwrap the cellophane from the cheese, cut out a wedge, pull off the wax, then coarsely grate it. It has a slightly dry texture like many Dutch cheeses, but it's actually one of the defining flavors of Yucatecan cuisine because it's been used here for so long.
Okay, now the warm filling, I'm going to put a handful of the cheese in there, and everyone's favorite, it will melt. I'm going to turn the heat off here. It's not fully melted yet, but I just want the heat of the pan to sort of gently melt it now. And then once it has cooled just slightly, I'm going to use it to stuff those chilies. And Mexico is super well known for its crema. It's sort of a sour cream, but more in the style of creme fraiche. And so I bought some of that I'm going to dollop over the top of these so that we can experience that while we're here. It's not something that we can get in the United States. And I'm going to put a little bit more of that grated cheese. And right before we serve, we're going to warm them through. I chose this Corvina, the Yucatecan Corvina, because it was really fresh. The eyes were clear and bulging. The gills, which are gone now, were bright red, and the flesh was really firm to the touch. I'm going to fillet it, but before I do that, I want to get started on a salsa, a roasted tomatillo salsa. And when I don't have a broiler to roast my tomatillos under, what I like to do is roast them in a pan, sort of a fast way. I cut them across the equator, and then I lay them cut side down in a skillet. And then for seasoning this salsa, I'm going to use the green habanero chili, the spicy floral one that is so common here in the Yucatan. I think 4 of those will be enough. And 4 cloves of garlic. I'm putting the garlic in there with its papery skin still attached. I'm going to let all that stuff roast until it's soft, and of course the tomatillos will be a little bit brown.
To fillet the fish, start by cutting along the dorsal fin down to the backbone. Now once you reach the backbone, flip the fish around and use your knife to cut down through the tail of the fish. Next, I like to cut around the rib bones to release the fillet. Then do the same thing to the other side of the fish. Now finally, square up your fillets to make them look nice and neat.
When the tomatillos were brown on one side, I flipped them over and let them cook for another couple minutes on the other side until they were completely soft. And the same thing with the garlic and the habaneros. I just want everything to be soft and a little brown. Now I've let them cool off a little bit so that they're handleable now. And I'm ready to make a marinade for the fish. And I'm going to use it also to season my salsa. So take the stems off of the habaneros and then slip the roasted garlic out of its little papery skin. And then combine those 2 ingredients in the blender. And like all marinades, we're going to need a little bit of acid. That's where I'm using the sour orange. So the tradition here is that you cut the exterior off because it's bitter, and then you poke a hole in the flower end of it, and then with your hands you just squeeze all of the juice out of it.
Now the reason for this is that there's a lot of seeds in these sour oranges. They're sour, 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 but very seedy. Some of our special sea salt goes in here, and it's quite a lot because this is a marinade, and it's also going to be used to season the salsa that's going to go with the grilled fish. Put the lid on and blend. Okay, those habaneros are pretty potent, so stand back. But I do want to get a little bit of that beautiful tropical aroma and that roasted garlic smell. It's so delicious. A spoonful of this over each of the fillets like that. Just smear it in. Nice. Okay. And then I'm going to put the blender jar back on here because the next step of this is to make our salsa.
Put the roasted tomatillos into the blender with the rest of the marinade. Next, add the herbs. I'm using the ones that I picked up at the farmer's market. Cilantro, basil, parsley. Then blend it all together.
That's the base of my roasted tomatillo salsa. Now, all it lacks for me is a little bit of diced avocado and some red onion to make it perfect. Okay, two things left to do. One is to light the fire so I can grill this beautiful fish. And the other thing is to make some mashed potatoes, but I'm adding a little local twist to that. Regular potatoes mixed with Mexican purple sweet potato. Purple on the outside, white on the inside. Super sweet. Makes great mashed potatoes. Now, the most important thing in grilling fish for me is to make sure I have a really hot fire and that I have a really hot grill grate. I prefer to oil the fish, not the grill grate. I think it sticks less that way. So I've got some oil here that I'm going to drizzle nicely over these marinated fish fillets. Then I'm going to use the back of my tongs to make sure that every part of this fillet is well oiled. Next step is to put the fillets skin side up directly over the hot part of the grill.
To finish the meal, I made a small kale salad with those beautiful heirloom tomatoes from the farmer's market. I put the Chile Rellenos in the oven for a few minutes to heat them through. And when it was time to serve the bread pudding, I diced up some fresh papaya and sliced up some more basil. That went on top with a bit more of that delicious local crema.
Cheers. Finally got it.
Okay, so I fired up your appetite. Some of my favorite dishes, entertaining tips, and Mexican travel inspirations. Well, now I want to hear what you have to say. Visit us at rickbayless.com/TV for recipes and a whole lot more.